You're scrolling at 2 in the morning and the apartment is silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing 3 floors below. No notifications. No plans tomorrow that require you to be anywhere specific. No one waiting for an update. No one who will notice if you don't post, don't respond, don't show up. And somewhere in that silence, not immediately, but after a few minutes of it settling around you, something uncomfortable starts to surface. Not loneliness exactly. Something underneath that. A kind of low-grade panic that has no obvious source but feels urgent anyway. Your thumb moves faster. The feed refreshes. You open another app. Check messages you already checked. Refresh again. The silence is still there. You're still alone. And the discomfort is intensifying in a way that makes you want to do something. Call someone, make plans, fill the space. Prove to yourself that the aloneness is temporary and voluntary, and not the thing it's starting to feel like. Arthur Schopenhauer spent most of his adult life alone. Not because he couldn't make friends. He was sharp, educated, moved in intellectual circles that would have welcomed his participation. He chose it. Deliberately. Consistently. He structured his entire life around the preservation of solitude, the way other men structure their lives around the accumulation of social capital. Every morning he worked in silence. Every afternoon he walked alone. Every evening he read, thought, wrote, always alone. His dinner companions were infrequent and strategic. His relationships were few and held at a distance that protected something he valued more than connection. And when people asked him why, when they suggested he was missing out on the richness of human community, when they implied that something must be wrong with a man who prefers his own company to the company of others, he had an answer that most people found deeply unsettling. He said that solitude is the natural state of the superior man, and that the person who cannot bear to be alone with himself is running from something he doesn't want to see. That second part is the part that lands wrong, because it implies that your discomfort with being alone is not a sign that you need more connection. It's a sign that there's something in you that you've been avoiding, and the presence of other people has been functioning as a very effective anesthetic. Society has a specific investment in you not figuring this out, not because it's cruel, because it needs you functional, productive, predictable, and reliably responsive to the mechanisms that organize collective life. The man who is comfortable alone is a problem. Not a dramatic problem, he's not going to burn anything down. But he's slippery, hard to manage. His compliance is optional in ways that the socially dependent man's compliance is not. He doesn't need the approval that comes from participation. He doesn't need the belonging that comes from conformity. He doesn't need the validation that comes from being seen. Which means the standard tools for managing behavior, social reward and social punishment, don't have the same grip on him. He can say no without the cost feeling prohibitive. He can walk away without the isolation feeling like exile. He can opt out without the fear that opting out means he stops existing in any meaningful sense. That kind of man is a structural inconvenience. So the culture, every movie, every song, every well-meaning relative at the family gathering, delivers the same message in 1,000 forms. Being alone is the problem. Connection is the solution. And a life spent in solitude is a life that has somehow gone wrong. The message is so pervasive that most people never examine it. They just absorb it as truth and organize their entire emotional lives around the avoidance of the thing they've been taught to fear. Schopenhauer thought this was not just wrong, but backwards. That the person who cannot be alone is the person with the problem. That the frantic pursuit of company, distraction, and social validation is not connection-seeking. It's escape behavior. You're not running toward people. You're running away from yourself. And the thing you're running from is the one thing you actually need to face if you're ever going to build a life that doesn't require constant external input to feel bearable. Let me know where you're watching from. Drop the city in the comments. I want to see how many people are sitting alone in their apartments right now, pretending they're not, because the phone is open and the feed is moving, and that counts as company somehow. Here's what Schopenhauer observed that almost no one wants to acknowledge. The person who needs constant social stimulation is advertising a deficit. Not a deficit of friends, a deficit of self. The interior is so underdeveloped, so unstable, so lacking in substance that it cannot support the weight of its own attention. It collapses under self-examination. So the person fills every moment with noise, with people, with activity, with anything that prevents them from being alone with the thing inside their own head that they don't want to meet. This is not introversion versus extroversion. That framing is too soft and lets people off the hook too easily. Schopenhauer was describing something sharper. The extrovert who genuinely enjoys people and draws energy from social interaction is not who he's talking about. He's talking about the person who cannot tolerate silence, who becomes anxious when plans fall through, who fills every gap with a phone call, a podcast, a scroll, something, anything, to avoid the experience of being alone with themselves for more than a few consecutive minutes. That person, Schopenhauer would say, is running from a confrontation that they will eventually lose, because you cannot outrun yourself. The thing you're avoiding is always there, waiting, getting stronger in proportion to how long you've been refusing to look at it. Every hour spent in distraction is an hour of compounding interest on a debt you're going to have to pay eventually. And when the payment comes due, when the breakup happens, when the friend group dissolves, when the job ends and the structure collapses and you're finally forced into sustained solitude, the reckoning is brutal in proportion to how long it was deferred. The man who has been practicing solitude, who has been sitting with himself regularly and learning how to be adequate company for his own mind, does not experience that collapse. Solitude for him is not exile, it's baseline. It's the condition from which all other interactions emerge and to which they return. He can be with people and enjoy it fully, because he's not using people as life support. He can be alone and not experience it as punishment, because his interior has been developed enough that it's inhabitable. This is the part that the connection-obsessed culture cannot process, that the person who is genuinely capable of deep connection is almost always the person who is also capable of deep solitude. These are not opposites, they are complements. The man who has nothing inside himself brings nothing to the interaction except need. He arrives empty and expects the other person to fill him. He doesn't connect, he extracts. And the exhaustion people feel around this type of person is not a mystery. They're being used as an emotional prosthetic. The person they're interacting with has outsourced their entire sense of stability to the presence of others. And the moment the others step away, the structure collapses and needs to be rebuilt from scratch the next time someone shows up. Schopenhauer was brutal about this. He said that the person who is bored when alone is in bad company. That if your own mind is so insufficiently developed that you can't stand to spend time with it, the problem is not the absence of others, it's the poverty of self. And the solution is not more connection, it's the construction of an interior worth inhabiting. The social pressure against solitude is not incidental, it's structural. Because a man who is comfortable alone is harder to sell to, harder to manipulate, harder to manage through the standard mechanisms of social reward and social punishment that keep the majority compliant and predictable. He doesn't need the product that promises to make him more attractive to others. He doesn't need the status symbol that signals his position in the hierarchy. He doesn't need the approval that comes from conforming to the group's expectations. His baseline is already stable. The things the market offers, connection, validation, belonging, are things he's learned to generate internally or live without, which means he's outside the dependency loop that makes consumer culture function. This is why the message that solitude equals loneliness is so aggressively marketed. Loneliness is a problem that requires a product. Solitude is not. Loneliness creates need, and need creates demand, and demand creates profit. Solitude creates self-sufficiency, and self-sufficiency is the death of an entire category of economic activity that depends on people being perpetually dissatisfied with their own company. The dating apps, the social platforms, the networking events, the self-help industrial complex that promises to teach you how to be more likable, more magnetic, more capable of attracting the connection you're supposedly missing, all of it depends on you believing that your aloneness is a deficit to be corrected rather than a condition to be mastered. The moment you stop believing that, the moment you realize that time alone is not time wasted but time invested in the only project that actually belongs to you, the development of a self that is substantial enough to be worth spending time with, the entire apparatus loses its grip. Schopenhauer understood this at the structural level. He wasn't advocating for misanthropy. He wasn't saying people are worthless and should be avoided. He was saying that the person who has not learned to be alone will never be fully present with others, because every interaction will carry the subtext of need. Every relationship will be distorted by the unspoken expectation that the other person is responsible for filling a void that only you can actually address. You'll be constantly scanning for reassurance, for validation, for proof that you're not alone in the way that terrifies you. And that constant scanning, that continuous low-grade anxiety about whether the connection is secure, whether the person still likes you, whether you're doing enough to maintain their presence, is the opposite of actual connection. It's surveillance, monitoring, the behavior of a person who is afraid that if they stop performing, the other person will leave and the aloneness will return, and they'll have to face the thing they've been running from this entire time. The man who is comfortable alone doesn't carry that fear. He can be fully present because he's not using the interaction as an existential crutch. If the person leaves, he returns to baseline. If the connection ends, he returns to the interior that he's already made livable. The loss is real. He's not pretending relationships don't matter, but it's not catastrophic. It doesn't destabilize him at the foundational level. He grieves, adjusts, and continues. Because his core stability was never contingent on the other person's presence in the first place. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he said that the superior man is self-sufficient. Not superior in the moral sense, not better as a human being. Superior in the structural sense, more internally robust, less dependent on external conditions to maintain equilibrium. The word superior here is not about hierarchy, it's about architecture. A building that can stand on its own foundation is superior to a building that requires continuous external support to remain upright. The self-sufficient man is simply better built. And the culture hates this. Not explicitly, no one is going to argue against self-sufficiency directly, but the implicit message is everywhere. The person who prefers solitude is strange, antisocial, missing out, not living life fully. Every narrative arc ends with connection. Every hero's journey concludes with the formation of community, the restoration of relationships, the triumphant return to the group. The man who walks away at the end and chooses solitude is either a tragic figure who couldn't integrate or a villain who rejected humanity. There's almost no representation of the man who simply prefers his own company and is thriving in it, because that story is not a story the culture wants to tell. It's a story that threatens the premise. Schopenhauer didn't care. He told it anyway, and the version of it that shows up in his writing is not romantic. He's not painting solitude as some transcendent mystical state where you commune with the universe and discover enlightenment. He's describing it as work, hard work, the work of building an interior that doesn't bore you, the work of developing interests, capacities, thoughts, and pursuits that are engaging enough to occupy your attention without requiring an audience. The work of sitting with discomfort long enough that it stops being discomfort and becomes simply the condition of being alive. Most people will never do this work because the first hour of it is so uncomfortable that they reach for the phone, the friend, the distraction, anything to make it stop. And every time they do that, they reset the clock. The interior never gets developed because they never stay in it long enough for the development to occur. The man who pushes through that first hour, and then the next, and then the next, discovers something that nobody told him was possible. That solitude is not the absence of something good. It's the presence of something most people never access. Quiet, clarity. The rare experience of a mind that is not being pulled in 12 directions by social obligation, performance anxiety, and the continuous monitoring of how others are perceiving you. In that quiet, things surface. Real things. Not the things you've been taught to want. The things you actually want. Not the thoughts you've been handed by the culture, the thoughts that are actually yours. Not the version of yourself that you perform for others, the version that exists when no one is watching. That version is worth meeting, but you'll never meet it in a crowded room. You'll never meet it with the phone open. You'll never meet it while you're filling every silence with noise and every gap with activity. You only meet it when you stop running, when you sit down in the silence and let it arrive. And the first time it does, it will probably be awkward. You won't know what to say to yourself. You won't know what to do with the time. The interior will feel unfurnished and cold and not particularly inviting. That's fine. You've been neglecting it for years. It takes time to make it livable, but every hour you spend there, it improves. The thoughts get sharper. The interests get deeper. The capacity for sustained attention without external stimulation gets stronger. And slowly, incrementally, you become the kind of person who doesn't need constant company to feel real. That is the transformation Schopenhauer was pointing toward. Not isolation, not misanthropy, Not the rejection of all human connection, just the cultivation of an interior that is robust enough to stand on its own, that can enjoy connection without requiring it, that can be alone without interpreting aloneness as failure, that can choose solitude not as a retreat from the world, but as a return to the only place where the actual work of becoming yourself can happen. The culture will not celebrate this. Your friends might not understand it. Your family will probably worry. Everyone around you has been conditioned to interpret time alone as time wasted, and they'll project that onto you. They'll ask if you're okay, if something's wrong, if you need to talk, and you'll have to make a choice in that moment. You can reassure them with the language they understand. Tell them you're fine, you're just busy, you'll hang out soon. Or you can tell them the truth, which is harder and lonelier and more accurate, that you're not avoiding people. You're cultivating something that requires solitude to grow, and that the discomfort they're feeling when they imagine you alone is not your discomfort. It's theirs. Most people can't handle that truth. They'll interpret it as rejection. They'll distance themselves. They'll tell themselves a story about how you've changed, how you're not the person you used to be, how solitude has made you cold or weird or unavailable. Let them. Their need for you to be constantly accessible is not your responsibility to manage. Their discomfort with your solitude is information about their relationship to their own aloneness, not yours. And if the friendship can't survive you spending time alone, it wasn't a friendship. It was a mutual dependence agreement that you've just violated by becoming less dependent. The friendships that survive this transition are the ones worth keeping. The people who can respect your need for solitude without interpreting it as a comment on their worth. The people who understand that time alone is not time away from them. It's time spent developing the version of you that can actually show up for them fully when you're together. Those people are rare. Schopenhauer would say they're rare because most people are too internally impoverished to understand the value of solitude in others. They experience it as threat because they can't conceive of it as anything other than punishment. But the ones who do understand, the ones who have done their own work, who have built their own interior, who have learned to be comfortable in their own silence, those people recognize you immediately. There's a quality to the interaction that's different. No performance, no need, no scanning for reassurance. Just two people who are genuinely present because neither of them is using the interaction to avoid something else. That's the kind of connection Schopenhauer valued. Rare, intentional, built on the foundation of two people who are individually complete rather than mutually dependent. And here's the paradox that the connection-obsessed culture cannot process. The person who is least afraid of being alone is the person most capable of genuine intimacy, because intimacy requires presence. And presence requires that you're not constantly distracted by the need to secure the other person's approval or avoid the terror of their absence. You can only be fully there when you're not afraid of being fully alone. The man who has mastered solitude brings his whole self to the interaction because he's not fragmenting his attention between the person in front of him and the monitoring system that's tracking whether he's still safe from aloneness. He's already safe. The baseline is already stable. The other person is not life support. They're a choice. A genuine, voluntary, uncoerced choice to share time with someone because the interaction is valuable, not because the alternative is unbearable. That shift, from need-based connection to choice-based connection, is the entire game. And it only happens when you've spent enough time alone that aloneness stops being the thing you're running from and becomes the thing you return to. The home base, the place where you recharge, recalibrate, and remember who you are, when no one is asking anything of you. Schopenhauer lived this way for decades. He was not lonely. He was not miserable. He was, by his own account, and by the accounts of people who knew him, deeply satisfied with a life that would have looked like deprivation to most people. He had his work. He had his walks. He had his books. He had a small number of carefully chosen relationships that he engaged with intentionally and held at a sustainable distance. And he had his solitude, vast, uninterrupted stretches of it, that he protected more fiercely than most people protect their most valuable possessions. Because he understood what most people don't, that solitude is not the absence of life. It's the condition under which life becomes fully your own. The modern world has made solitude almost impossible to access. Not because it's physically unavailable, you can close the door, turn off the phone, carve out the time, but because the psychological pressure to fill every moment with connection, content, or productivity is so intense that most people feel guilty when they're not doing something that can be categorized as useful or social. Solitude doesn't fit either category. It looks like wasted time. It doesn't produce anything measurable. It doesn't advance your career, expand your network, or contribute to your personal brand. It's just time spent with yourself. And the culture has trained you to believe that time spent with yourself is time that could have been better spent elsewhere. Schopenhauer would tell you that this is exactly backwards. That time spent in genuine solitude, not distraction disguised as alone time, but actual engaged presence with your own interior, is the most productive time available to you. Because it's the only time when you're not performing, not responding, not managing someone else's expectations or emotions. It's the only time when you have full access to your own thoughts without the static of social obligation. And in that access, things become clear. Priorities sharpen. Decisions simplify. The noise that seemed urgent yesterday reveals itself as background interference. The things that actually matter, the few things that are genuinely important rather than merely loud, come into focus. This is why people who spend regular time in solitude make better decisions. Not because they're smarter or more disciplined, because they have access to a signal that most people have drowned out with noise. They know what they actually want because they've spent time asking themselves without an audience present to distort the answer. They know what matters because they've had the space to examine their priorities without the social pressure to adopt someone else's. They know who they are because they've been practicing being themselves in the only environment where the performance can be dropped completely, alone with no one watching, no one judging, no one to impress or manage or accommodate. That self-knowledge is the foundation of everything else. You cannot build a life that's authentically yours if you don't know what you actually value. And you cannot know what you actually value if you never spend time alone with the question. The constant presence of others, even people you love, even people who mean well, introduces interference. Their preferences bleed into yours. Their expectations shape your choices. Their judgments, real or imagined, constrain your behavior. You end up living a life that's some aggregate of what everyone around you thinks you should want, filtered through your attempts to maintain their approval and avoid their disappointment. That's not a life. That's a performance reviewed by committee. Solitude lets you fire the committee. It gives you the space to ask the questions that have real answers. What do I actually enjoy? What do I care about when no one is watching? What would I pursue if I didn't have to justify it to anyone? What kind of life would I build if the only person I had to please was myself? These are not selfish questions. They're foundational questions. And most people never answer them because they never create the conditions under which honest answers can emerge. Those conditions require solitude. Sustained, regular, unapologetic solitude. And here's what happens when you start practicing it. The first week is uncomfortable. The discomfort is not subtle. It's sharp, insistent, almost physical. Your brain, conditioned to constant stimulation, will generate 1,000 reasons why you should be doing something else. Anything else. You'll think of errands that need running, messages that need answering, tasks that suddenly seem urgent despite having been irrelevant for months. This is resistance. Your psychology throwing up defenses against the thing it's been trained to avoid. Push through it. Don't fill the gap. Sit with the discomfort. Let it be uncomfortable. The discomfort is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're doing the thing that actually matters. By the second week, the discomfort starts to diminish. Not because solitude gets easier, but because you start to acclimate. The silence stops feeling like an emergency. The absence of input stops feeling like deprivation. You start noticing things you couldn't see before. The quality of light at different times of day. The texture of your own thoughts when they're not being interrupted every 3 minutes. The difference between genuine interest and socially motivated activity. Small realizations arrive. Nothing dramatic. Just incremental clarity about what you actually care about versus what you've been performing caring about, because the performance was easier than the examination. By the third week, something shifts. Solitude stops being something you're enduring and becomes something you're choosing. You start protecting it, guarding it, declining invitations not because you're avoiding people, but because the time alone has become valuable in a way that the social obligation isn't. This is when people start commenting. They notice the shift. They ask if everything's okay. They express concern that you're isolating. They use the word lonely, even though you haven't said anything about being lonely, because they're projecting. They cannot imagine that you're alone by choice and genuinely content, because they've never experienced that themselves. So they interpret your solitude through the lens of their own fear, and they try to rescue you from something you don't need rescuing from. This is the test. This is where most people break. The social pressure to reconnect, to reassure everyone that you're not depressed or antisocial or going through something, becomes intense enough that it's easier to just go back to the old pattern. Fill the calendar. Respond to every invitation. Be available. Prove that you're still the person they're comfortable with. And if you do that, if you collapse under the pressure and return to constant availability, you lose the thing you were building. The interior that was starting to take shape goes back to being a waiting room, unfurnished, uninhabited, just a space you pass through on your way to being with other people. But if you hold the boundary, if you stay in the practice even when people are uncomfortable with it, something remarkable happens. The people who are concerned stop being concerned, not because they suddenly understand solitude, because they adjust. They recalibrate their expectations. They stop interpreting your absence as a problem and start accepting it as a characteristic. You become the person who's sometimes unavailable, and that becomes normal, and the pressure to constantly justify it diminishes. And in that diminishment, you get your time back, fully, without guilt, without the background hum of social obligation pulling at your attention even when you're alone. That's when the real work begins. Because now you have the space, and the space is no longer filled with the anxiety of defending the space. You can actually use it. You can read the book that's been sitting on your shelf for 2 years. You can start the project that requires deep focus and can't be done in stolen minutes between obligations. You can think, actually think, the long-form version that requires hours of uninterrupted attention about the questions that matter. You can build something, not for an audience, not for validation, just because it's worth building, and you're the one who wants to build it. This is the version of productivity that the hustle culture doesn't talk about, because it doesn't scale, it doesn't produce content, it doesn't generate metrics. It's just a man alone with a problem or a project or a question, working on it without distraction, without performance, without the need to document the process for external consumption. The output might be extraordinary, it might be mediocre, it doesn't matter. The value is not in the output. It's in the fact that the work is being done for its own sake, and that changes the quality of the work at a level that's difficult to articulate, but immediately recognizable when you see it. Schopenhauer's work has that quality. You can feel it in the writing, the absence of performance, the lack of concern with how the ideas will be received, the focus on the problem itself, rather than the management of the reader's perception. He wrote for himself first. If others found value in it, fine. If not, also fine. His baseline was already stable. The work was its own reward. And that autonomy, that complete independence from external validation, is what gives his philosophy its weight. It's not trying to sell you anything, it's not trying to convince you. It's just describing what he saw with the precision of someone who doesn't care whether you agree or not. That's the prize at the end of sustained solitude. Not enlightenment, not transcendence, just autonomy. The capacity to do work that's genuinely yours, to make choices that reflect your actual values, to live in a way that doesn't require constant external validation to feel legitimate. The capacity to be alone without it feeling like punishment, to be with others without it feeling like obligation, to move through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they can return to solitude and be fine there. More than fine. Home. You're going to hear a lot of messages telling you that connection is everything, that relationships are what make life meaningful, that the measure of a good life is the size of your network and the depth of your social ties. Those messages are not wrong. Connection is valuable, relationships do matter, but they're incomplete. They leave out the part where connection without self-sufficiency is dependency, and dependency without awareness is slavery. You become a hostage to the presence of others, and the moment they withdraw, your structure collapses. That's not connection, that's addiction. The addiction to not being alone. Schopenhauer offers the counter-narrative, that the person who has mastered solitude is free in a way that the socially dependent person will never be, that the capacity to be alone is not a deficit to be corrected, but a skill to be cultivated, that time spent developing an interior worth inhabiting is not time wasted, but time invested in the only project that will accompany you from birth to death, the construction of a self that you don't need to escape from. The world will resist this. The culture will pathologize it. The people around you will misunderstand it. Do it anyway. Find the time. Protect the time. Sit in the silence even when the silence is uncomfortable. Let the discomfort teach you what it's been trying to teach you this entire time. That you are enough company for yourself, that the interior is not empty, that solitude is not exile, it's homecoming. And the man who has made that journey, who has built a home inside himself that he can return to regardless of what the external world is doing, is the man who cannot be controlled, cannot be managed, cannot be manipulated through the threat of isolation. Because isolation is not a threat to him. It's baseline. It's where the work happens. It's where he becomes most fully himself. That's the man society needs you not to become. Because that man doesn't need what society is selling. He's already found what everyone else is searching for. And he found it alone in the silence, in the place where most people are too afraid to look. If you're reading this and recognizing the pattern, if you've been filling every gap with noise and people and distraction because the silence feels like something you can't survive, comment below. I reclaim the silence, not as a confession, as a commitment. Then hit subscribe and turn on notifications because the work we're doing here is not for the crowd. It's for the man who's finally ready to stop performing and start building. Next video drops in 3 days. Miss it and you'll wish you hadn't.